I'm saying I don't really understand how the question is intelligible. Now, there's a way of understanding the question as intelligible, which is what I was trying to delineate, which is if you're skeptical about whether or not I have beliefs, then I could try to answer that question, which is a different question about whether or not I'm skeptical, right?
All
Like,
right,
I'm not.
All right, so I am accepting or granting your worldview for the sake of argument. Doesn't mean that I believe you when you say that, the Christian God doesn't exist, or when you say that when you say that your worldview is true. I don't actually believe that. What I'm doing is I'm granting your argument. I'm granting your worldview to perform a reductio ad absurdum, to demonstrate the inconsistency within your own worldview. And what I've asked you several times now, with no response, is how do you know that you exist? And what you've told me is that you exist, your explanation is you exist because you believe it. Well, that doesn't explain anything, because I'm still trying to understand in what context are you anything or, over another thing, and in existence, what is the context of existence from your worldview? I still have zero explanation for what even the sentence or the question means, or the statement, I know that I exist, or the question, how do I know that I exist? We need to go over the basic fundamentals of your worldview in order to understand what that even means. And so in what context is it that you exist, and how do you know it?
Okay, so I don't know what relevance the context thing is, but I don't think it's going to change my answer. So we can talk about the context thing, because I'll ask you to explicate what exactly you mean by context
Here we go
in a
again.
second.
Deceptive nonsense. You haven't changed one bit, Josh. Not one
Well,
bit.
wait, but I don't understand. What I said was deceptive. Did I lie?
Yeah. So what is reality? What is the context of the experience that you're having? Can you give me a basic fundamental parameter of your worldview? Are you able to do that?
Are you just saying what are like preconditions?
Yeah, like what's
Is that what?
Yeah, like I was asking you before what the ontological absolute is in your worldview. What is it that is logically prior to all contingent properties and facts? From your worldview, what is identifiable that you can reference that is necessary when you speak on what is the case? What is the overall context in which all things derive and depend?
Yeah, so we should probably take this slow, because we're going to have to unpack these concepts as you go through them. So one of the things I'm confused by is the word contingent. Are you using contingent in the modal sense, or are you using it in the causal sense?
What I want to know is, okay, so the universe, do you believe that it is eternal, or that it is derivative?
What's your phone number? I guess I have an intuition that, well, there are two notions of eternal, right? One is exists at every point in time, and so I think that since time is composed of the universe, in that sense, it's eternal. But if you mean past infinite, I'm agnostic towards the view whether or not the universe is past infinite, but I lean I lean towards the view that it's past infinite.
Okay, so you don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if the universe is finite or
Okay,
past finite
so
or infinite.
that means that since you are part of the universe, okay, because everything that exists, let's just say that everything that exists to your recollection inhabits the universe, and you don't know whether this universe is eternal or is derivative. Or so basically, when I ask you a question about the universe, about any given fact of the universe, you're going to basically be answering me based on the initial starting point of, I don't know.
Well, I'm not sure what the inference is there, because it's like, the point is, I don't know the cause. You're saying that your argument is something like, if you don't know the cause of the universe, then you don't know anything. I don't know the cause of the universe, therefore I don't know anything. Is that your?
Well, if you don't know the cause of the universe and you don't know whether or not any particular in the universe is derivative or self-contained and infinite, if you don't know what is fundamentally ultimate to anything else, you don't know what is fundamental from your worldview perspective. If you can't identify that, well, then how can you then make a statement, a true statement on anything other than it just being a random, a random guess, a conjecture, basically just, well, this is just my opinion or the way things seem to be, but I could be wrong. How is that not the case from your
Yeah,
worldview perspective?
well, I'm just not sure. Like, so there are a few things I don't think I could be wrong about, right? Like, I don't think I can be wrong about having beliefs, for example, because being wrong implies that you have beliefs, and if you have beliefs, then it follows that you have beliefs. That's just P implies P. That's the tautology. So I don't think I could be wrong about that, for
Okay.
example.
Well, let's press that for a second. All right, so you don't think that you could be wrong about your beliefs, okay?
No,
But
the
I want
fact
to
that
know.
not all my belief, not I could have wrong beliefs. In fact, I do have false beliefs, I'm sure, but I couldn't be
Yeah,
wrong
but
about the fact that I have beliefs.
yeah. So let's press that a little bit. So in this context that you have beliefs, what is you referring to ontologically speaking in a universe where where you don't really know the ontological source of anything?
Yeah, see, this is the inference I'm not sure I understand. Like, assume well, when you say ontological source, you're just saying you're saying the cause of everything. Is that right? When you say ontological?
Well, either it's the either it's going to be the case that there is an ontological source, or particulars are just going to exist in bruteness, right? Would that be a proper dilemma?
I'm not sure, because I don't think that, like, if you said something like there are just brute facts, I don't think it follows from that there's no ontological source. It just means that there's no additional dependencies besides the things themselves. I mean, they would be the source for everything, right? Every brute fact would be the source of everything else on that view.
Okay, so there's multiple particulars. So okay, so it's either the case that everything is dependent upon something, or that many things are independent, but what is it that unifies any of those independent things?
Yeah, so I don't think that that's a true dichotomy, right? Like, I think you can take two options. There can be an initial state that is independent, that is to say, doesn't have a causal explanation, but then everything that follows that initial state is a dependent fact, right? I think that's an option. Or you can have each fact is ontologically independent, whatever this language means, because it's not clear to me what it even means, but I'll just say for the sake of argument. Or it's the case that there's some dependency on something that's not a brute fact, right? So I think there are three options there, and my view is the first option that I gave, which is that there's an initial state that I'm not sure if it's the beginning of the universe or something other than that, right? But I think that there's an initial brutally contingent fact that ultimately explains all other contingent facts.
A brutally contingent fact? Is that what you said?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so there is no self-contained, eternal, non-derivative absolute, but rather the absolute that is responsible for all contingency is contingent itself.
Okay, can we go through those properties that you talked about first, right? Like, so no self-contained. Now, on one interpretation, I think that this is just incoherent. For something to be self-contained, like, imagine what it means for a box to contain itself, you know, like that's just nonsense, right? So that implies a contradiction.
That's a category error. A box to contain itself. Well, so the context of the eternally self-contained and non-derivative God is that he exists in and of himself. He exists by his own nature. That is his nature. His nature is that he is. Okay, I think it might even be improper to say that he exists, but rather that he is, and everything contingent exists in virtue of him. And so what it sounds like is what you're explaining sounds like you're entertaining some type of infinite regress of contingency, and there is no ontological absolute or primary by which all contingent properties derive from. There is no identifiable dictate to why anything is, but rather that there's always going to be this further point that dictates, the last contingent thing that you've mentioned. And so what I want to know is if you are deriving your inferences based on this absolute or based on this single point, this causal chain, if you will, how do you know that, the thing before that, logically speaking, isn't going to dictate that all things change in the next, 10 minutes?
Yeah, so there's a whole lot of stuff that you said there. Do you mind if I interrupt you when I think that there's a conceptual issue? Because, I don't want to do that. I've been letting you talk, but there's a lot of ground that you cover that I think is confused. But in the interest of politeness, I decided not to interrupt. So, by proceeding, is it okay if I interrupt you where I think that there's a confusion in what you're saying?
I guess you can, but here's the thing, Josh. To be honest, I believe that what you're doing is you're just trying to perform mental gymnastics in order to get around the initial question of how you know anything to be true, including how you know
He's always done this, JT, with any Christian for years.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that's true.
exist?
Yeah, so I gave an answer to that question, and I'm not really sure what you found dissatisfactory about that answer. My answer was that I have beliefs, and if I have beliefs, then I exist.
Yeah,
Right, and I
that's
couldn't be wrong about the fact that I have beliefs because beliefs are the
is
types of
that not
things
just
that are
a
self-known.
tautology?
Yeah, I think yeah, it is a tautology. That's why I couldn't be wrong about it, right? Beliefs are the types of things that are self-known. Now,
Hold on a
this is
second.
why I was saying that
Let me
there are.
just ask. Let me, if you don't mind, I just want to ask. How did you determine that you're not, let's say, thinking God's thoughts after him, or thinking some other thoughts? How do you know that? I don't see how it follows that because there are thoughts taking place, that therefore those thoughts are your own.
Yeah, that's why I was
Yes.
asking the
That would be a
context.
critique on you, and if you're borrowing from Rene Descartes, that I is full of presuppositions that think, that notion, that the thinking that has taken place, even if that's granted, I don't see how it follows that because there's thinking taking place that the thoughts are yours.
Yeah, so I guess, like, look, it's possible that I didn't exist, right? Like, that's a logically possible world, There are some worlds in which I exist, some worlds in which I don't. And so presumably it's consistent to say that there is thinking going on. There's thinking going on in those worlds, in some of those worlds at least, where I don't exist, right? And so the question is sort of like, well, what distinguishes this world from that world? And the only answer that I could give is that there's this relationship between beliefs that constitutes the believer, right? And so it's in virtue of that relationship, and that relationship I was talking about with self-knowledge. It's in virtue of that relationship that I'm constituted.
Would you like
And
me to?
because that's
Would you like me to ask the
okay.
question again?
Well, I was answering the question.
No.
No, you weren't.
No, you
Yeah,
were
I
just
said,
going on about some other stuff. So the question again was, how does it follow that because there's thinking taking place, that the thinking is in fact yours?
yeah, in virtue of the relationship of the beliefs, right? The beliefs are self-known, and that's in virtue of which
Now
they're not
that's
your
circular.
beliefs.
The beliefs are derivational of the thinking that's taking place. But so again, the question was, how does it follow that because there's thinking taking place, which the beliefs would follow? How does it follow that the thinking taking place is in fact yours?
Yeah, because they stand in a constituency relation. That's why.
Yeah, but how do you
I don't
know
know
that?
what that means.
Well, what a constituency relation is just that there are things that constitute other things. So my network of beliefs is constituted by the beliefs themselves. And what makes it that they're my beliefs rather than anyone else's beliefs is that they're self-known. So, for example, your beliefs are
No, I
self-known
don't
to you.
see
You
how
know
that.
what you
I don't see
believe.
how that follows.
Yeah.
It doesn't follow that because there's thinking taking place and certain relationships that follow and beliefs that derive from that. It still doesn't follow. I don't see how it follows that the thinking that's taking place is in fact yours.
Well, the relationships are what constitute them being mine.
The relationships would be secondary. We're talking about the thinking taking place, which would be primary, because if it is in fact not your thoughts that are taking place, then the beliefs wouldn't be yours either. Right?
Yeah, how do you know that your individuality?
Sorry, I'm not. Sorry, we say that again. Someone cut out.
Yeah, how do you know that your individuality isn't just an illusion to you?
Yeah, that's exactly. It would have to mean, for that to be true, it would have to mean something for it to be an illusion. But for it to be an illusion, that presupposes the truth of those beliefs, and if that presupposes the truth of those beliefs, then it's impossible for it to be. So that I can give a formal argument for that. I think the idea for that is just that P implies not P, right? And therefore, you can conclude from that simply that not P is true. That's the form of the argument that I take you to be giving, right? And so you can just derive just like straightforwardly through classical logic that P implies not P implies not P. So not P is just true. So yeah, I don't really understand. It's like you're asking a question with a
You're
tautological answer.
presupposing formal logic. What constitutes the realm that you are inhabiting? That the universe or your experience even holds to logic. Why? What instantiates and determines that laws of logic are even necessary?
Yeah, so that question sounds like a category error because they're
Well, I mean, you're using
laws of logic
to justify. You're using logic to justify how it is that your thoughts are justified as being your thoughts.
Well,
But
no, I mean,
any metaphysical framework for how things like laws of logic even work, what the ontology of you even means, how you-ness is even differentiated between between any other particular. I mean, you're really just what it sounds like you're doing is you're presupposing.
There's a few more even. There's a presupposition of a rational mind. There's
Yeah.
a presupposition of identity over time, right? You're putting these thoughts consecutively within a time index. So is the connection between those things real? I mean, that statement alone needs a lot of unpacking.
Well, it's not really clear to me what your question is, right? So, like, I don't think that anything changes fundamentally about any of the answers that I've given you, because what I'm saying justifies the belief. Well, I mean, in some sense, it's not even clear that it makes sense to justify these things, but there is an answer to how you know something that isn't like born via inference. The whole point there is just that it's known in virtue of being believed. That's just what self-knowledge is, right? And so when you say something like, oh, identity over time, you just say that the relationships persist over time and that they still, whether or not time moves forward, there's still this relationship of self-knowledge between beliefs, and that's known because of the constituency relations themselves.
Hold on. The problem is you're just making a statement explaining what something is, but you're not giving an account, right? You're presupposing these things, and instead of accounting for them, making sense of these things, you're just telling us what's taking place. But that's not what anyone's asking you.
Let me just, when you say account, what exactly are you asking for? Because that's, then if you're saying I'm not answering you, then I just don't know what account means to you. Are you asking for an inference?
Well, just what makes these things real, these memories and the time.
Yeah, but see, here the problem is what you said is I was just telling you what things are real, and then that wasn't giving an account. But if telling you what things are real is supposed to be giving an account, then I have given an account.
Well, you're just saying that there's these thoughts that are, placed within a time index, and the connections between those things are real because you think they're real.
Yeah. But I don't understand. What is this stuff about time indexes? I'm not presupposing any specific theory of time.
You would require like a concrete unifier, right?
I don't know what that means. I don't know what it like. Look, when you say something like here's what I'm not understanding, right? So when you're trying to do what you were saying, what JT said when we started this conversation is we were trying to do an internal critique of my view, and then it sounds like the questions you're asking me don't have anything to do with my beliefs. Like, it's not the case that you've derived some contradiction from my beliefs. It's more now that you're saying, well, we need a concrete unifier and all this stuff.
Look, it's not, I mean, look, you believe that the laws of logic hold, right?
think he might have cut off.
Josh? Oh, okay.
Yeah, if you're trying to talk right now, Josh, nobody can hear you. Something happened to your mic or your connection. But, I mean, this is what we did last time he was in here. Basically,
Hold on,
you just
I
went
lost
on
connection.
for...
Sorry, I lost
Yeah.
connection. I came back.
Yeah,
So you guys do,
Let me,
we
there
still
is a
haven't
certain
really
level.
heard any answers to what is the case from your worldview. You haven't really answered anything or given an account for anything yet. All you've done is you kind of just assumed things and just danced around the question.
yeah, but okay. So like here, even if it's the case, like let's just stipulate for the sake of argument that there are some things that I've assumed. I'm not granting that, but let's just say for the sake of argument that it's true, or I've assumed some things. That's not a reductio ad absurdum on my view, right?
Yeah.
Because the whole point of a reductio ad absurdum is what you have to do is you show that you take some of the sets of beliefs that I have.
Hang on a second. So you just said something. You just said that you haven't, or that you did not that you did not dance around the question or so basically when I asked you what the so you've basically just made claims and assumed things without actually justifying what it is that what it is that your worldview is. So when we're trying to perform a reductio ad absurdum of your worldview, it's going to require you to answer the questions that we're asking you, but you keep dancing around the questions by just stating what is the case, or you're assuming certain certain facts about the universe without actually giving an account for it. That's what Redefine was getting at, was that you are not giving an account for anything. And so once again, this is getting kind of redundant, because all you're doing is you're just performing mental gymnastics. You're not fooling anybody here. Okay? And so all you're really doing is you're performing mental gymnastics in order to get away from the you're trying to get away from having to answer the tough question and expose the baselessness of your own worldview.
Yeah, I don't
This is
think
a
I've
tactic,
avoided.
and
I
I'm
don't.
well aware of this tactic.
Well,
And
let me
so
just be.
once again,
Let's just.
what is it in your worldview that is real, and why is it real, and why is it coherent, and what is it that all things derive and depend upon?
Yeah, so this is the thing that you've said about all things deriving and depending upon. And I'm not sure what derivation is doing there. I don't know what that means. But when you say depend in the causal notion, I already explained that this idea, this is why we talked about the PSR in the earlier conversation, that this idea that the PSR is true just makes nonsense out of the whole idea of contingency and causal relations. Like, it's just, that view turns out to be incoherent. So it's not. So that's my view, is that there's nothing of that sort, because supposing something of that sort is incoherent, and I don't think incoherent things are true. That's part of my view, is that incoherent things are not true. That's part of my worldview, right?
Wait,
Now,
so
if you
causal connections are not true?
no, I'm saying there can't be, if the PSR is true, the principle of sufficient reason is true, then there can't be causality. Yeah, that's what.
So when we invoke something like the universe, is that referring to a concrete one, or a concrete many?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the relevance of that question is. So here's the way I'm going to understand what you're saying, right? Pick either horn of the dilemma that you're presumably proposing, conjoin it with the proposition that God does not exist and derive a contradiction, right? Because that's what I'm taking to be an internal critique, right? So,
Look,
but it's only with that conjunction that God exists. Let me just finish. It's only with the conjunction that God does not exist, because whatever the answer is, maybe I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not even sure it's relevant, but I want you to show how the question is pertinent to the discussion. And so, in order to show that it's pertinent to the discussion, what you have to do is take both options of that conjunction, combine it with the proposition that God does not exist, and then derive a contradiction.
yeah,
That's what an
well,
internal
it's
critique
pretty
is.
simple. I only have about 5 minutes, so I can explain this like pretty simply. So presumably you believe the laws of logic hold, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what that means for them to
You believe the
hold.
law. You believe A is A. You believe that universal. You
Yeah,
believe that
do
it
I think?
universally applies to all things.
Yeah, do I think that? Look, yeah, do I? If you're asking if I think that they're true, they're defined as true in logic.
Okay, so are they universal?
Yeah, they're defined as true in logics.
Okay, and how do you know that to be the case?
They're defined as true in logics. I don't know what you're talking about. It's just from possessing the concept. Just like this, if
I'm
someone
asking
were
you,
to say, "How do you know?"
how do you know it's the case that in reality that is logical convention in your view?
No,
It's not a convention. Okay, so it's actually something so the world is actually gonna be like represented, or the laws of logic are gonna be representative of how things are, correct?
yeah, I don't know what it means to say they represent anything.
Josh, this is starting to border onto dishonesty. Okay, if you think that the grass is grass, right, and green is green, right, we're talking about the laws of logic, right?
Yeah, those are
Do you believe
tautologies. I
that in
take those to be
reality?
true.
Yeah.
Tautologies are true.
Okay. So how do you know that's actually the case in reality?
How do I know that tautologies are true in reality? It's defined in the logic.
So is this true by definition? Are you just saying that you're just defining truths as what things that are actually the case as things that are holding or that are consistent with the laws of logic?
Yeah,
Is
well,
that just
see,
how you're conceptualizing of truth as?
yeah, well, see, when I say defined, I'm just saying it's part of the concept, right? It's part of the concept of truth in this case. That what it means is to be consistent with the laws of logic. When I say they're defined in terms of the logics, what I'm saying is it's part of the concept of truth simpliciter that the laws of logic are true.
Okay, so in reality, right? If I were to look at the grass, in my front on my front lawn or whatever, and you were to say the grass is not the grass, okay? How do you know that's not the case?
It's a contradiction, which is false under every interpretation of logic, right?
So you take logic to be like necessarily true, like the world could not be any other way.
Yeah, so the reason that this question is
Okay,
the reason
and
that this question
why?
doesn't make any sense is that the reason that this question is because the notion of necessity just means something like consistent with logical axioms in the
No, I
logical
got that.
space, right?
So you take, I know. So I'm assuming that you take like logic to be like bodily the broadest kind of a sphere or something like that.
Hmm.
Okay, so how do you know that that's actually the case?
I don't know what that means. That's just the understanding of the modality.
Yeah, but how do you know that this actually like representative of reality?
Yeah,
How do you know
this
that's the
question. I
case?
don't know what it means. Like, you have to explain what it means to represent reality, because I don't know what that means. It sounds like that
That is
presupposes some sort
accurately
of.
that it accurate that it
Sorry,
accurately is describing how reality
let me just finish
operates.
my question. Let me just finish the reason that I don't understand it, right? Like, so it seems like it's presupposing some correspondence theory of truth, which I don't understand. And so if I don't accept the correspondence theory of truth, then it's just a nonsense question.
Do you believe that reality operates in certain ways that are logical?
Yeah.
Okay, how do you know?
Well, it's like I said, it's trivially true. The only things that could be
Okay,
true
so it's true by
are things that
definition.
are consistent.
Let's just understand this. So you're just saying it's true by definition.
It's true by understanding the concept of truth. Yeah.
Okay, so then it's not something that you've actually like been able to tell me like what in virtue of what is actually the case.
Well, yeah, but the whole point is that it doesn't make any sense for there to be something over and above logic that makes logic true, because that sounds like it's presupposing logical relations, which it just falls into a bootstrapping objection, right? Well, how is that? How is it the
Well,
case
in the
that
Christian,
makes those true?
I'll give you an
Well,
example. So in the
but
Christian
hold
worldview,
on, let me just finish what the bootstrapping
okay.
objection is, right? The
Yeah, I
problem
mean, I only
with
have like
this.
2 minutes. I'm driving somewhere right now. That's why I
Okay,
said I just wanted to
I just wanted,
wrap this up
well, you
really
need
quickly.
to, well, the reason that the objection is pertinent is because you need to explain what's wrong with the reasoning. So the bootstrapping objection is that for something to be, for something to make the laws of logic true, that thing would have to stand in logical relations to the laws of logic. But to stand in logical relations to the laws of logic is to say that logic already exists, but that's supposed to be the thing that grounds logic. And so it couldn't be the case because it just ends up being a contradiction, right?
Yeah,
There couldn't
I'm
be such.
familiar with bootstrapping. I'm familiar with that. What I'm asking, so I'm going to give you like an example, or I'm going to show you like the Christian worldview and how like we'd answer that question, and then I have to go. So the Christian worldview basically would say that logic is representative of how God is and how God thinks, the mind of God. And so when God creates the world, when God created the universe, that is just going to be a way, like a reflection of the way that God thinks, and that's the same way, or that's the same. That's going to be the same for things like uniformity, and when things are like unified, like we're talking about like relationships between facts and things like that. That's ultimately what's going to happen. So it's not that, for example, in this case, the Christian God would create the laws of logic, but the laws of logic are representative of God's eternal character and nature. So that's how I would answer that kind of a question. But I do have to go. I'm actually driving.
Okay.
I just made it to where I
Well,
need to be. So
all right. Thanks, Jay. What it sounds like is that you believe, from your worldview, that laws of logic are contingent upon the minds of those who are using laws of logic.
No, they're not contingent at all. They couldn't be contingent. I mean, that's just nonsense. There's no contingency.
Okay. So there's a distinction between the individual who is thinking and using logic and the actual substance or particular of this logic itself, right?
Yeah, people are not logic. Yeah.
Okay, so when we say when we say that logic exists, in virtue of what does it exist?
I don't think logic exists. I don't know if that makes any sense, right? I don't. It's not like logic has an ontology. I don't think it's an abstract object out there in the ether or something that we somehow access, right? That's not what I think of logic. And to be honest, that view doesn't even sound coherent with uh, uh, the view that God is a se, right? Because obviously, then there are just like Platonic logical objects, but that's not what I'm saying. So I don't think that logic exists per se. But what I do think is that truths are expressed in logics, right? And so asking a question about what makes a logic true is to invoke some sort of meta logic, but inside that logic that we're invoking, presumably, is the meta logic. And so that's just an unevaluable claim. It just can't be evaluated. It can't be understood. When someone makes a question, when someone asks a question like, what logic is true or something like that, because truths are expressed in logics.
Yeah, that doesn't seem so. I still don't understand what you're getting at. What
Well,
you're
all right.
explaining bears no relevance to any context that I can wrap my mind around. It sounds like what you're saying is that logics exist or logics are, but they aren't representative of anything. They don't stand in causal relation to anything. they exist, or they are, or that, there's some reality to the fact that that we use logic, but we can't really give an explanation for what that even means. It just seems like you're spouting a bunch of nonsense and not giving an account for anything. Once again, I feel like we haven't even got off square one from the beginning of this conversation, because you still haven't given an account for anything, for how you know that anything actually is the case.
Yeah, so I gave a bunch of reasons. I gave something that was indubitable, that I knew that was indubitable, and that's that I have beliefs, and I explained that beliefs stand in constituency relations, and so in virtue of that, I couldn't be wrong, because to have the belief is to know that one has the belief. And I also can give accounts. It's not particularly interesting to me, because unless my interlocutor, which is you, is denying something like induction, that induction can confer reasons to believe or true beliefs or something like that, then I wouldn't understand what question you're asking. Because if you're not asking for an inductive argument, if you're not asking for a deductive argument, if you're not asking for a constitutive explanation, and if you're not asking for an abductive argument, then I have no idea what you're asking for. Right, but it seems to me like you accept all of those things. You accept abduction. Presumably, you think that there's the best explanation for things, or you accept that induction, you can make inductive inferences, and those can be true. And just in case that they're true, presumably on a justified true belief view, that's their knowledge. They count as knowledge on that view. The same thing is true of deductive arguments. You can derive the truth of other propositions from some propositions that you hold to be true, and I take those to be justificatory, right? And so if you're saying that I can't provide an argument for arguments, it's just like, yeah, you're asking for something that's incoherent, right? You're asking for something over and above an argument and an argument, which just sounds like a contradiction. So that's why I don't understand any of your questions. But if we can just get to, let's cut to the chase and say, you think that atheism is incoherent, right? Like, you think that you can derive a contradiction from the view that no God exists, right? Or do you think that atheism is coherent? Do you think that atheism is coherent?
No, it's incoherent, because once again, all you've given so far are just a bunch of brute facts. You haven't explained why anything is. And so all of your explanations are just, they're presupposing so many other things. And that's where the problem is. The problem is that you haven't said anything substantive so far. All you've done is just a bunch of brute facts.
Yeah, I'm not sure how you're concluding that, but like, if I grant for the sake of argument that that's true, which there's absolutely no reason for me to be this charitable, but if I am to grant for the sake of argument that everything I have had, everything I've said is in fact substanceless, it doesn't follow, therefore, that atheism is false. That's just a genetic fallacy or an ad hominem, right? And so if you're not saying that it makes sense to say that atheism is false because I don't have a substantive view, then you must be able to be giving an argument from the proposition God does not exist to a contradiction. And that's what I'm interested in.
Josh, we've wasted enough time. What you just did was you misrepresented what the argument actually is, okay? Because I'm not saying that, all views of atheism are false because what you just stated is a bunch of brute facts back to back. What I'm saying is that your predication on these facts are baseless, and that's the contradiction. The contradiction is that you are stepping up to the plate as if what you are saying bears any relevance to anything at all. Okay, but then when I ask you, okay, in what context is any of this relevant? You don't give me an answer. You can't give me an answer because you don't know.
Well, I just don't know how you're using terms. Like, I don't know what you mean by context in this. But if you want to show that atheism is absurd, I just want to get to the meat of the conversation.
You know what? This is a colossal waste of time. Okay, because I've just explained to you that all you've been doing is just spouting brute facts ever since you came up here, and you haven't given a single explanation for how anything is or why anything is. And every time I try to ask you what the context is in which you exist, in which you are stating things that are actually true and actually the case in reality, irrespective of your fallible mind, you have no answer for that. And so we're done.